Hello again and welcome to part 4 of this hypothetical round-the-world voyage. Last time we stopped at the Torres Straits, at the point where the Pacific Ocean meets the Indian Ocean. And at that point, anyone on a world voyage has the option of two very different routes. To continue to Europe via the North Indian Ocean and the Red Sea, or to continue along the trade wind route to the Cape of Good Hope and reach the South Atlantic that way. Taking the northern route to the Red Sea, the winds at the beginning of the year, in January and February, when this is the safe season to sail west across the Indian Ocean, if we start from Thailand in Phuket, or even from Malaysia, the winds to Galle in Sri Lanka would be perfect from the northeast, and those good winds will continue all the way across the North Indian Ocean to the Red Sea, to Bab el-Mandeb, which is at the southern part of the Red Sea. And then you enter the Red Sea and the wind conditions do not change immediately, but at some point, sailing north, they switch from northeasterly winds to northerly, and then absolutely from ahead. And this is one of the points why some people are deterred from sailing this route. But if most of the factor of safety in the Red Sea has deteriorated recently, there are problems in the southern part of it, in Yemen, some also in Sudan, and certainly as you reach the northern part, the situation is also quite uncertain. So that would be quite a deterrent for anyone looking at it from the safety point of view. And this is why the majority of the boats nowadays would take the Cape of Good Hope route. In spite of all that, from what I found out from a shipping agent in Suez, there have been 15 or 16 boats completed this route through the Red Sea coming from the south last year. But that compares to about 150 boats on a world voyage that took the South Africa and Cape of Good Hope route. So sailing west from the Torres Straits, one has the option of calling at ports in southern Indonesia or in the north of Australia. The winds on that route from Torres Straits to Darwin in northern Australia are perfect. They are mostly southeasterly winds, consistent, fairly strong, and those conditions continue all the way into the South Indian Ocean, as you can see from Darwin to Cocos Keeling. Cocos Keeling is a very popular and attractive destination for boats on a world voyage. And this is a photograph of an area of Direction Island where the local authorities, this is an Australian territory, have created an area which is reserved for visiting yachts. There is also a local telephone there. You can call the Australian police from the main island to come and complete the entry formalities. Sailing west from Cocos Keeling, the winds continue to be favorable. In fact, the South Indian Ocean has some of the most consistent and at the same time virtually the strongest trade winds anywhere in the world. You can see on these two windgrams from Cocos Keeling sailing to Mauritius, the winds are strong, force 5, even force 6, and occasionally even force 7 on the Beaufort scale. And those conditions continue all the way to La Réunion. So this is something to bear in mind, that the winds are really very good, very strong, and maybe for some people might be too strong for their taste, but at least they blow from the right direction. One point I need to make by sailing west across the South Indian Ocean is that whereas until very recently, it was considered that the safe season in that part of the world stretched from about June to November. In fact, October now is considered to be a period of quite risk of tropical storms. And as you can see from this pilot chart for the South Indian Ocean for the month of October, there are already a number of tropical storm cyclones that have been registered there. So the safe solution would be to attempt to sail later, and that means that perhaps, excuse me, I should correct that, they should be earlier, and that would mean that to leave the tropics by late September or early October. The winds from Reunion to Durban are very good. Again, you can see fairly strong, but from a good direction. And those conditions would then change, because from Durban to Cape Town, it's a completely different kind of situation, because it's not only the wind that should be considered, but even more so the strong south-setting Aguias current. Fortunately, the weather forecasts in that part of the world are very good and very reliable. And the worst conditions along the route between Durban, around the Cape of Good Hope, to Cape Town are created by a depression coming up from the direction of Antarctica and hitting the south-setting strong Aguias current, which can attain 3 knots or even more. And these are conditions to be avoided. Normally, small boats would just sail close to the coast and take short tacks in the sheltered waters, or maybe enter one of the many South African ports along this route where you can seek shelter. In any case, the winds are quite mixed on that part of the voyage from Durban to Cape Town. But as I pointed out earlier, this is something that you should take your time and wait for the best conditions to complete this passage. Here we are with my boat sailing around Cape Aguias, which is the southernmost point of the African continent. It's not the Cape of Good Hope, but Cape Aguias. And along this route, very soon, we reach the Cape of Good Hope, and that way to Cape Town. And this nice marina in the shadow, as it were, of Table Mountain, perfect place to switch over from the Indian Ocean to the South Atlantic and start preparing for the continuation of your voyage. So as you can see here on the left-hand side, from South Africa and from Cape Town, the voyage continues in the northwesterly direction. And the majority of the boats sailing from Cape Town north, especially those who are planning to sail back to Europe if they started from there, the winds and the trade winds from Cape Town to St. Helena are perfect, some of the most consistent and reliable trade winds in the world. And then continue from there, boats bound for Europe, you sail to Cape Verde. Again, the winds are okay until you reach the equator. And once you've crossed the equator into the northern hemisphere, the winds change in direction, and then they come quite strongly, blowing from the northeast. And this is why those conditions continue all the way to Cape Verde, to the Canary Islands. I sailed that route myself, and we managed to sail it okay, but we had to take quite a lot of tacks against the prevailing northeasterly winds. And then if you continue on that route on your way to Western Europe, from the Canary Islands, the winds continue to be very consistent northeasterlies if you want to say to La Coruña and then on across the Bay of Biscay. Well, all those headwinds deter you from taking that route. Then some solution is always available, and that many sailors would take this decision to sail from the Cape Verde Islands to the Azores. As you can see, the winds are on a close reach, but it's quite feasible to sail that route. And then from the Azores, sail to Falmouth along the Bay, having crossed the Bay of Biscay, and reach Western Europe from there. Going back now to Cape Town and the return voyage, and having taken the European boats back to the point of their departure, we now can deal with the boats that have preferred, for whatever reason, to sail from the southern Atlantic to the Caribbean. The route from St. Helena northwest to Brazil and Fernando de Noronha an island off the coast of Brazil and an excellent point to clear into Brazil are very good, continue the steady southeasterly winds, and then sailing along the South African, sailing along the South American coast and the coast of Brazil from Fernando de Noronha to Trinidad and Tobago in the Caribbean, the winds gradually shift to the northeast once the equator is crossed, but they are still blowing from the right direction, and you also have a very strong and favorable current to take you along. This is a detour, and this is a route that would be sailed by American boats maybe, or boats that would like to reach the eastern coast of the United States. A good point of departure will be St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands. And the winds from here sailing to Miami would be perfect. There are northeasterly winds. Or anyone planning to sail to a more northern destination like the Chesapeake Bay or even further north would have also good winds, not as perfect and consistent as those sailing to Miami, but still basically from the right direction. And these are the two windgrams for the month of April, which is just towards the end of the safe season in the Caribbean. Again, we return to the general map of the round the world voyage because we want to deal now with boats that want to sail from the Caribbean all the way to the United States west coast, and sailing west from Antigua or any other place in the Eastern Caribbean to Panama. The winds are very consistent. This is, as I pointed out earlier, during the safe season in April or perhaps early May. And they are quite consistent from the northeast, force 5, and sometimes even force 6. Having reached the Panama Canal, transiting the Panama Canal into the Pacific Ocean, anyone planning to sail to the west coast of the United States have to bear in mind two facts. One, that the tropical storm season, the hurricane season along the coast of Central America and Mexico starts in May. There have been quite a number of hurricanes recorded in the last 10 years that had occurred in May. So ideally, one should start from the Eastern Caribbean earlier, transit the Panama Canal not later than April, and make your way northwest or west during the safe season. If you decide to sail to the west coast of the United States, the long route via Hawaii, the winds are perfect. There are very good northeasterly trade winds. And continue from there, from Hawaii to the west coast, to a place like San Francisco. Indeed, you have to bear in mind that now you are faced by the same northeasterly winds, which can be quite strong, and it takes quite some tactical methods to bypass not only just the headwinds, but also the North Pacific high pressure cell. But in any case, one way or another, you have reached now the west coast, and our hypothetical around the world voyage should actually stop there. However, those who plan to sail from Panama along the coast of South America, along the coast of Central America to Mexico, and then possibly to Southern California, will see that in May, as I pointed out, and as you can see on this pilot chart from the Ocean Atlas, there are indeed hurricanes of Central America and Mexico in the month of May. So this route should be sailed ideally in April. Just to show you the winds from Panama to Cabo San Lucas would be from ahead, mostly northeasterly winds or even sometimes even northwesterly winds. But then from there to Los Angeles, the winds continue to be from ahead. And this is one reason why I have also shown the pilot charts and the windgrams of a voyage from Panama or from Cabo San Lucas to Hawaii. You can see, sailing west from Cabo San Lucas, the winds are perfect, absolutely from the northeast. But then again, as I pointed out earlier, sailing from Hawaii to the west coast is a certain challenge, but it can be done. And I have now brought you back if you started from the US West Coast. And in a way, we have reached the end of this hypothetical voyage, which, as I pointed out at the very beginning of part one, was to show you that even in these changing times, it is still possible to plan a long voyage, whether across an ocean or all the way around the world, in safety, provided you are aware of the changes that have occurred in climate change and make an absolute effort, as I pointed out, not to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. Indeed, caution, I should say, lies at the heart of voyage planning. And by being aware of the changes in climate conditions and taking advantage of the greatly improved reliability of long-term weather forecasts, it is still possible to plan a safe voyage even in these changing times. And taking into account the facts that have been mentioned in part 1, 2, 3, and now 4, will provide valuable points of reference in planning, preparing, and bringing a voyage to a safe, enjoyable, and gratifying conclusion. So, but you need the tools, and this was the object behind this whole presentation, to show you that indeed the tools are there, and I have made my own contribution to that by preparing and writing and publishing a number of books, and I start with the Ocean Atlas. In fact, the books that I'm going to mention next are, in a way, the books that I wish I had had myself when I started off on our very first voyage, almost exactly 50 years ago from here, London, where I speak now. So let's go to the Atlas. For those who are experienced and sailors and have done some ocean passages, I believe that the best book to start off on planning a longer voyage is the latest edition of the Ocean Atlas, because it gives a very good idea of the weather conditions and the critical seasons that will be encountered along a proposed route. This latest edition contains a wealth of data on recent phenomena that have a direct bearing on voyage planning and the consequences of climate change on offshore sailing generally, whether you're just sailing across an ocean or all the way around the world. The next book, which I would recommend, is World Voyage Planner. It is now in the 3rd edition, and it should also be ideally acquired early in the planning stages of a voyage, as it contains all the essential information, not only on weather conditions and safe season and so on, but it also helps with the choice of a suitable boat and equipment for a longer voyage, as well as how to prepare the boat and the crew for a long voyage. I've done a lot of research for this book, and not only by writing much about my own experiences, but also I've done a large number of surveys with over 100 experienced long-distance sailors, they give a lot of practical advice, and there's a lot of practical advice in this book on safe seasons and routes, also a worldwide network of service hubs for emergency repairs, medical facilities in the various places, international flights, and so on. So this is very much a practical tool to plan your voyage and get that kind of information they want to need when you plan a voyage to anywhere in the world. And that takes me to a book which I wrote with Doina, who actually is in charge of putting together and presenting these presentations on YouTube. It's World Cruising Routes. And this is a compendium of 197 maritime nations, and provides a detailed description not only of the countries that you may be planning to visit on your world voyage, but also their history, their main attractions, or the essential information on local yacht clubs, on marinas, boatyards, repair facilities, and so on, that you may want to need and may want to know what to expect in virtually every country of the world. And that brings us to my classic, The World Cruising Route. This is now in its 9th edition. This is a book that once you've decided which route to sail, whether across an ocean or all the way around the world, it describes over 1,000 routes all over the world, in all oceans, and also from the Arctic to the Antarctic. It is now in the 9th edition, so it's been fully updated to take into account the latest changes in climate conditions. But also, apart from practical advice on certain routes, it also gives some information on formalities and restrictions that you might encounter along the land route, also safety factors, as well as the normally and as expected weather and climate conditions on any of those 1,000 plus routes. And finally, I come to my latest book, my memoir, Sail the World with Me. And it's the kind of book that I certainly wish I had been able to read myself, written by somebody else, those many, many years ago when I planned my first voyage. Although I would like all of you to read it, but certainly those who don't have much offshore experience and do not know what to expect from a long voyage, I would certainly highly recommend this book, because it was written for a person like I was myself when I was dreaming of setting off on a world voyage and didn't really know where to start. My book describes my various voyages over all these years and includes also a lot of practical information on voyage planning, on dealing with emergencies, on energy generation, automatic pilots versus wind vanes, onboard pharmacy, provisioning meals, watches, sailing as a family, if sailing with children, some tips on education, etc. Every chapter that describes and deals with the stage of one of my voyages is followed by a practical chapter that deals with specific subjects, as one mentioned just now. And I want to assure you that if you read this book, you will learn a lot, not only from my own personal experience, but also, I must admit, from my own mistakes and how I learned to deal with a wide variety of emergencies during 50 years of sailing. It also provides a good opportunity to understand how important it is to have the right attitude and the right mindset when embarking on a long voyage. So here we are. I came around from having taken you all the way around the world on that hypothetical voyage. And I also need to point out that all my books are also published in German and French, not just in English, with the exception, of course, my memoir as well. And the only book that is only in English is World Cruising Destinations. So all that I can say now is safe sailing and bon voyage.